वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णकरुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौरांगी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी शुभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये पञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते रघुनाथ स्वामी विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषवादी पाश्चात्य कम करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं ओम श्री चैतन्य ईश्वरं हरि ओम। Hare Krishna. So welcome. Thank you for all those who made it possible to join today. We are continuing our discussion on the 11th chapter of the 7th canto, which is a discussion on the perfect society. So Srila Prabhupada, across his Bhaktivedanta purports, across his classes, would so much emphasize the need to organize society in a perfect way. So Srila Prabhupada has written very extensively on this topic, and he has expressed multiple times the sentiment that because I have less time, I have focused on spiritual education. But at the same time, my other half of my mission, which still needs to be developed further, is the setting up of the perfect society, which is the implementation of the Varnashrama Dharma. So while we are all practicing our Sanatan Dharma in terms of doing the sadhana of bhakti, it is also important to mold our lives, our conditioned lives, based on our conditioned body, conditioned mind, in a way that will be most progressive for us for our spiritual evolution. Not only most progressive from our spiritual evolution, but most suited for us to maximize our peace, our happiness, our well-being. So this is a very, very scientific system, which is an eternal system, which has been developed by the Lord, even through the Vedas. That's why even simply following the Varnashram Dharma, even though it is not by itself taking one back to Godhead, it can, because it is the instruction of the Lord, because it is the will of the Lord, because the duties of Varnashram are given through the Vedas, and the Vedas are instructions of the Lord coming through the breath of Lord Vishnu. And this is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter. Krishna says that Tasma Sarvagatam Brahma Nityam Yajne Pratishtitam. That performing the prescribed duties itself is yajna, and the supreme truth is eternally situated in the acts of yajna. So performance of prescribed duties is itself there, and prescribed duties are based on the Varnashram principles. So this is a standard way for society to function so that the whole society can be peaceful, can be happy, and can be spiritually progressive. So this is a very important part of the Vedic teaching. The Vedic Dharma, both Sanatan and Varnashram. In fact, Prabhupada considers uh, Varnashram as a part of Sanatan, and in one sense, we discussed last time also that the Varnashram principles by themselves are eternal. The only thing is that Varnashram principles are based on one's material conditioning. So, in that sense, they are not the eternal nature of the soul. But the principles of Varnashram are eternal for society, for existence, for all time to come. So, in this particular chapter, Narad Muni is explaining to Yudhishthir Maharaj. He's explained about the Sanatan Dharma. He has explained around 30 principles, starting with the 4 pillars of religion: Satya, Daya, Tapa, Shaucham, and then so many principles which are additional principles to have a progressive spiritual life in harmony with divine principles. And the last 9 being the core principles of Sanatana Dharma, which are the 9 limbs of devotional service: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnoho, Smaranam, Arjanam, Mandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. Slightly different words have been used, but they refer to the same 9 limbs. And perfect human being, or what to speak of perfect, a human being is one who follows this. So a human life isn't quite a human life unless it is pursuing a higher ideal, a spiritual ideal. Prabhupada was very clear, the scriptures are very clear. That life which is not aligned with Sanatan Dharma and or Varnashram Dharma is actually as good as an animal life. The word Arya and Anarya are often used. Arya is usually translated as noble. But actually the word Arya, Srila Prabhupada translates as those who know the progressive value of the human form of life. Those who know that this human form of life is very special, very rare, and has a very, very specific capability invested in it, which allows the living entity inside to develop its full potential, which is not available in any other species. And those who waste it and simply do the same activities like other animals are considered as good as animals. We often call them as two-legged animals. Such human beings as two-legged animals. The famous Mahabharata verse, right? Ahara nidra bhayamaithunam cha samanyam etat pashubi narana dharmo hitesham adhiko vishesho dharmena hina pashubi samana. Those who doesn't follow dharma, Sanatana Dharma and Varnashram Dharma, and simply does the same activities, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, like other animals, they are no better than animals. What is the difference? Why you even need a human form of life? You don't. Because human form of life means so many rules and regulations, job, education, marriage, responsibilities. You simply want to enjoy senses, better be an animal, isn't it? नायम देहो देह भाजाम नरलोके कष्टान कामान अर्हति विडुजानिये. Rishabdev instructs his sons that this human form of life is not for sense gratification. Tapo divyam putrakayena sattam shuddhayad yasmad brahma saukyam tanam. It is for divine tapasya of following the system, Sanatana Dharma, Varnashram Dharma, following that whether we like it or not, so that one is progressive and ultimately can taste the nectar of spiritual realization. Brahma Saukhyam Tvanantam, unlimited Brahma Saukya. Brahma Saukya means the pleasure of realization of the transcendent self, the transcendent Lord. Brahma Saukhyam Tvanantam. So these 30 principles were discussed in verses 8 to 12, and now we are continuing in the description of the Varnashram system. As we mentioned, the next 4.5 chapters are discussions on Varnashram. The remaining part of this chapter is predominantly, it has actually 3 parts, predominantly a discussion of the overview of the 4 Varnas. What are the 4 Varnas and what are the main characteristics and duties of the 4 Varnas. The second topic that is discussed is what about mixed Varnas? Somebody may say, oh, I have a Brahmana father and a Kshatriya mother. What is my duty? Huh? So that aspect of various kinds of mixed castes and where do they fall and what is their status? That part is discussed to some degree. There are other Dharma Shastras which discuss with all these things in much greater detail. Of course, Bhagavatam gives a high-level framework. Then qualifications of a chaste wife are also discussed because this is a very, very important aspect of successful Grihastha ashram, which is there in all the 4 Varnas. So the 4 Varnas are described as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Out of these 4, the upper 3 are called Dvija. Dvija, Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya are known as Dvija. Dvija means twice born. And Prabhupada has explained this concept multiple times across the purports. Hopefully, you're studying Srila Prabhupada books regularly, you will be already familiar. Prabhupada says those first birth is the seminal birth. Janmana jayate Shudra. Samskarat bhavati vidhijaha. By birth, everyone is a Shudra, including those who are born in Shudra families. But through following proper samskaras, if the family is following proper samskaras for the newborn child, then through the samskaras, the child is second born. So second birth typically is when one receives initiation into Vedic knowledge from the spiritual master. And in the Vedic system in previously, there would be one of the samskaras, which is known as the Upanayana samskara, where the Gayatri mantra would be given, and the sacred thread would be given as a part of the Upanayana samskara to begin spiritual and material education for the child, typically done around the age of 8, typically, where the child goes to the Gurukul. Now, it is common misunderstanding that this is done only for Brahmanas. So, this is not true. This samskaras and this approach is there for all the Dvijas, all 3 Dvijas, Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, and the Vaishyas. It is only the Shudras who do not follow the samskara process or do not accept a spiritual master. That is why they don't come under the category of Dvija. They are still accepted within the Varnashram system, and we will discuss why. Because they still follow the rules for the Shudras. And in that sense, they are still progressive because they are in the system somewhere, though not really, so well connected as the Dvijas, because the Dvijas follow a system. So Narad Muni starts by explaining that those who have been purified through the samskaras beginning with Garbhadhan. What is the Garbhadhan samskar? Prabhupada speaks extensively about this across his purports also. Some points Prabhupada emphasizes across. Where he says that right from the time of conception, even for conception, even the union of a man and woman is considered a yajna if it is done according to the ritual of Garbhadan Samskar with the right motivation. In fact, Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, Kamosmi dharma aviruddho. I am that lust which is not against religious principles. So religious union is where a duly wedded man and woman come together after performing proper Garbhadan Samskar for the purpose of having a Krishna conscious progeny, and then go on later to train them, the child, the principles of spiritual life. So that is the proper approach to procreation, and that kind of a service is considered not sense gratification but a yajna, and that is not considered entangling. So even sex life has its proper place. It is not condemned, but whimsical sex life for sense enjoyment is said to be entangling. Not necessarily sinful, but entangling, especially within married life. Of course, otherwise, if it transgresses the principle of married life, then obviously it becomes sinful. No question about that. But either it can be performed as a yajna or it can be performed for sense gratification. When as a yajna, it is purifying and it is a representative of Krishna because it is created for that purpose. When something is used for the purpose that it is created, it is the perfection of its use. It is his dharma. It is according to dharma. When it is used in a deviant way for one's own enjoyment, then one strays and then one gets entangled. This is the common principle, not just for this particular discussion, but generally across all kinds of activities. So wherever the samskaras are properly performed, and samskaras are typically performed, there are around 10 prominent samskaras. Actually, there are many more, but Gopal Bhatta Goswami gives 10 prominent ones. I think there are some 25, 26 or something like that across one's lifetime. I don't remember clearly the number, so please forgive me if the number is not correct, but there are considerable, right from Garbhadan, then of course the birth samskar, the cutting of the umbilical cord, the first hair cutting, the first grain feeding, the first writing of the first alphabet, the Upanan samskar, the marriage samskar, then the death samskar. I'm just mentioning a few. And for the ladies, even before they give birth, after they conceive, there is a samskar at 3 months, there is a samskar. There is a Pumsa Vahan at 3 months, then there is a, Simanto Nayan at 7th, 8th month, right? And there are many such samskaras. So all these samskaras are meant to samskri, means nicely do, means to prop. The whole idea of a samskar is to create the right impressions on the consciousness of the individuals involved so that they remain aligned with dharma at various stages of their life. So these samskaras are like, software updates. At the right time, you need a software update. Okay, this is what you should be thinking. This is how you should orient yourself at this stage of your life. So the whole Vedic culture is all about reminding us again and again of how to orient our lives in Krishna consciousness. To not forget that everything is ultimately meant for Hari Toshanam, pleasing the Supreme Lord, correct? The Bhagavatam itself says that Sanushtita Pumsam Vishvaksena Kata. Sorry. What is the beginning of that verse? Samsiddhir Hari Toshanam. Anyway, I'm not recollecting right now, but that verse says that all the Varnashram duties are ultimately meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme. So that is always the guiding principle in Sanatana Dharma. So the higher three Varnas are expected to be following the proper rituals of the samskaras across generations, properly following the family traditions, whatever the family traditions, whether one is a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, the traditions may be slightly different. But according to their respective traditions, properly following all these rituals, all such Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, they become purified through the samskaras, purified by their proper behavior. And such people should properly worship the Lord, properly study the Vedas, properly give charity, and they should follow the system of the four ashramas: Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. Now, a quick comment here, even though it is not mentioned here immediately, we'll discuss this four ashramas more in detail in the next chapter. But generally, uh, all four ashramas are for the Brahmins: Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. Amongst the Kshatriyas, not everybody is able to and does take sannyas. So, generally, up to Vanaprastha is what Kshatriyas will go. It's not that there will always be exceptions, but generally up to that. Vaishyas, they are a bit more conditioned. Even though they are encouraged to go to Vanaprastha, they are not too inclined because they are a bit more attached, even than the Kshatriyas. So you will see a fair amount of renunciation or at least going to Vanaprastha amongst the great kings, Raja Rishis. Amongst the Brahmanas, it is quite common. Vaishyas, you will not see so much. So ideally, everyone is encouraged, but in practicality, this is how it is observed. Now, Narad Muni starts going into the details of the four Varnas. So first he says, out of the four, three are Dvija, because all three receive the sacred thread and go to the Guru's ashram. Of course, when they go to the Guru's ashram, Brahmanas get Brahman-like training, Kshatriyas get Kshatriya-like training, Vaishyas get Vaishya-like training. Of course, there are some courses which are common, but then obviously based on their Varna, there are specific things which are taught. Vaishyas are taught more Vaishya-like skills. Military arts are taught in greater detail to the Kshatriyas. Brahmanas are more focused on the deep Vedic study and deep study of the performance of Vedic rituals. But all three go to the ashram of the Guru. Okay, so this is another important thing. Please do not think just because a person wears a thread means he's a Brahmana. It simply means he's a Dvija, or at least supposed to be a Dvija. Dvija, a person doesn't become Dvija simply by wearing thread. Prabhupada would often say, without following proper samskaras and without following proper behavior of the Varna that he comes from, one is not even a qualified Dvija. Correct? Just like simply by putting a stethoscope around the neck, one doesn't become a doctor. Correct? If I put a doctor's coat and put a stethoscope and go around, all I know is doing this to the patient with a stethoscope. I don't become a doctor simply by that. Just by wearing a sacred thread and wrapping it around the ear while going to the washroom, that's not adequate qualifications to be a Dvija. Qualities and behavior. And this is also a very, very important principle. Even though it's not discussed here, I don't discuss in this chapter, perhaps it's discussed in other subsequent chapters. But a very important principle is that one is, and this is mentioned in the Gita as well, Chatur Varnya Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashah. that these four Varnas are according to Guna and Karma, according to qualities and activities, not according to birth, which technically means that it is possible to move from one Varna to another. Move meaning be born in one, but adopt or develop the qualities and adopt the activities if one is properly trained and qualified. Of course, that is not a very common scenario, but technically the framework allows based on one's qualities rather than based on birth. So, Brahmana, what are the key occupational duties of a Brahman? Narad Muni says six. There are six key occupational duties which are the hallmark of a Brahman. Yajan Yajan, Pathan Pathan, Dan Pratigraha. Yajan Yajan means to worship and to help others perform worship as a priest. Correct? Nowadays, so many Brahmanas, when we want to do a yajna, we are not trained in the ritual. So we will pay a Purohit. We'll give him some dakshina and the Purohit will come and perform the ritual on behalf of the Yajman. And such a performer is known as a Ritvik. They will do uh, the ritual on behalf. So, Yajan Yajan, Pathan Pathan, study of scriptures and teaching of scriptures. And Dana Pratigraha, they will give in charity and also accept charity. 6 duties of a Brahman. First class Brahman does nothing beyond these 6. What does that mean? No job, no business, study scriptures, worships, and whatever charity is given based on whoever he is teaching. He doesn't put a label to the a price label on his services. Whatever they give, whatever the Yajman will give, whatever the students will give, he'll just accept and he's happy. The Shastra say the Brahmana accepts a vow of poverty. Vow of poverty doesn't mean I want to be poor. Vow of poverty means he's okay with whatever comes by the arrangement of the Lord. He is not making any special effort. Because he's thinking at the end of the day, what is the point? He's very well, he's not just studying and teaching, he understands spiritual knowledge. Brahma janati ti brahmana. They are well versed in spiritual knowledge. That is why they are not too fascinated by material attainment. Of course, nowadays, those who perform Paurohitya, many of them or most of them will put labels and they will not even accept to do certain things unless at least this much fee is paid. Even to do kathas, people will take money. Even to do kirtan, people will take money. So that is, and big money and fixed amounts. Otherwise, they'll refuse to come. So that is not the nature of a Brahman. Narad Muni says a Kshatriya, his main duty is to do administration, to rule. And how does he get money? He gets money for his living, for his maintenance by levying taxes. So he governs and rules, and when he governs and rules, in return for protecting and organizing and governing the kingdom, the residents of the kingdom give him tax. So tax as well as fine. What does fine mean? If somebody does something wrong, goes against the law, then he can collect fine. So all that are his legal means of income. Custom duties, uh, traversing his borders, uh, custom duties on goods. So tax, customs duties, and fines. A Kshatriya should always be guided by a Brahman. But because a Brahman is worshipable for a Kshatriya cannot levy taxes on a Brahman. He can levy taxes on other Kshatriyas, he can levy taxes on Vaishya, he can put on Shudras, but he cannot levy taxes on a Brahman. One thing mentioned for a Kshatriya is that it is okay for a Kshatriya, even though that's not his main occupation, a Kshatriya can perform 5 out of the 6 activities that a Brahmana does. He can do Yajan, he can do Pathan, he can do Dana, but he cannot do Pratigraha. Means he can give in charity, but he cannot take charity. A Kshatriya is never supposed to live on charity. He has to earn his living through his profession. So, even when in the ashram of the Guru, the Kshatriyas are also studying the scriptures. Kshatriyas are also to some extent learning. Of course, the depth of a Brahmana's learning, both of rituals and scripture, is much deeper and much extensive than that of a Kshatriya. But a Kshatriya is allowed also 5 out of the 6 duties. Vaishya. Vaishya are chiefly mercantile people, mercantile community. They should also, like the Kshatriyas, always follow the direction of the Brahmanas. And what are their main occupational duties? Agriculture, trade, cow protection. Huh? Correct? Go Raksha, Vanijyam, and uh, cultivation of farm. This is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita also. The Bhagavad Gita also summarizes the principal duties of the 4 Varnas. The Shudras, they are their primary duty, because they are neither skilled as Vaishyas, nor as Kshatriyas, nor as Brahmanas, which means they are not qualified, not because of their birth, but because of their qualities and their lack of training and skills. They can neither do the duties of a Vaishya, which means they can, they cannot produce wealth. Vaishyas are basically wealth producers of society. Kshatriyas are basically the governors of society. So Shudras cannot do government or administration, they cannot do wealth production. They are not even so intelligent and pure that they can guide and do spiritual duties like the Brahmanas. So that is why, because they cannot do any of these 3, they cannot do the function of the head of the social body, they cannot do the function of the hands of the social body, they cannot do the function of the belly of the social bodies. The Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, and the belly is the Vaishyas. That is why they have to do the function of the legs of the social body, which means they carry the body, which means they serve the other 3 by carrying them, by rendering services to them. That is why the duty, or the only duty of a Shudra, is to accept a master from one of the 3 higher Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, and engage in their service. And in return for their service, they are taken care. They may be given a salary, they may be provided their necessities by the employer. Now, another point, uh, Srila Narad Muni mentions is that while Brahmana's chief duties or main activities are yajan, yajan, patan, patan, dan, pratigraha, these six, huh, Brahmana has an alternative for his own maintenance if he is finding it too difficult to live in poverty. That whatever comes, huh, correct? So many Brahmanas complain, oh, how, Prabhu, my children's, you know, education, this, that, how I can manage with this. It's simply donation, huh, or dakshina. So Brahmana is also allowed to do the occupational duties of a Vaishya. What does that mean? Which means a Brahmana can have cows, a Brahmana can have his own land, and a Brahmana can trade in any of the surplus of the produce from the lands or the milk of the cows. So in that way, he is allowed for his maintenance to also do as a side activity. To have a land and till a land, grow grains and vegetables, and have cows and milk them. So that is also considered acceptable. Not the topmost, but that is acceptable. So there are many wealthy Brahmanas also who had significant lands, who had significant cows, and also were quite wealthy. However, that is not the topmost standard. So there are different levels of Brahmana, which the Bhagavatam mentions in verse 16 of this particular chapter. And it is said that one may accept any one of this system to maintain themselves. Huh? So we will go through quickly the four ways in which a Brahmana may maintain himself, from the lowest to the highest. So the lowest is he adopts the additionally the duties of a Vaishya. He has land, does agriculture, he has cows, he does some trade. Higher than that, and that is known as Varta, that kind of alternative duty for a Brahmana is known as Varta. Then there is another kind of duty which is known as Shalina. And in this category, the Brahmana simply depends on whatever is received without begging. Which means he doesn't go on asking, but whatever comes to the Brahmana, he receives without begging. Some Brahmanas are like this, some sadhus are also like this. They'll just sit on the bank of a river, maybe in a holy place. They'll not go and beg, they'll not ask. They'll just wait for some, in holy places, it is very common. And nowadays, I don't know, probably not so common, but at one time it was very common that Grahasthas would come perform puja, they'll go around and distribute some grains, some dakshinas, and go around and give to the Brahmanas there. So whatever comes on its own accord, somebody comes and puts something, they will take. So that is known as Shalina. Then there is another type which is even higher, which is known as Yayavara. Yayavara means that one goes to the paddy field. Means basically grains, the fields, whether the fields are belonging to a Vaishya or a Brahmana, they go to the fields. And they go to the fields and say, Baba, thoda, can you give me some grains? And whatever that the farmer or whoever is the landlord of that particular field, he may give some grains, he takes that and he uses it for his maintenance. That is begging in the paddy field for 1 day's grains. And this is not to stock up. He doesn't say, give me 5 5 sacks of grains for 1 month stock. That is not allowed for a Brahman. A Brahman should not do stocking. Collects for that one day, takes it home, cooks it. Next day, if he wants, he has to procure in another way or again beg. So that is Yayavara. And then there is the Silonchanam. Silonchanam means one neither grows grains nor begs anywhere or waits to take from somewhere. He just goes to those places where grains just happen to be scattered on the ground. So if you go, for example, if you go into a field, you'll see some grains fallen on the ground. Huh? Or you'll go near a grain shop or a warehouse. Huh? You will see some grains scattered on the floor. Not packed, not kept in baskets, just scattered on the ground. Huh? So they will just go and gather some of those grains, clean them, and use them for making their meals. Which means collecting paddy which is left in a field or in the shops of grain dealers. Shilonchanam. So Shilonchanam is considered the highest. Great acharyas like Raghunath Das Goswami, at one time they were, anyway, we'll discuss that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, how he elevated his levels of renunciation. At one time he would be waiting for somebody to give. Then he came to the state where he would take only things which are rejected. Then he came to the point of rejecting even that and just drinking 3 palmfuls of buttermilk in a day. That's all. Very extreme renunciation. So the best is to follow the Shilonchanam system. Of course, these things are very difficult nowadays. Not that there are not grains scattered on the ground, but not many people will prefer to live like that. This is very, very austere. Okay, now the next section. So this was a quick overview of the 4 Varnas and their duties. Okay. Now there is a section on emergency duties. Now, what does emergency duties mean? That when social order is fine and everything is going on well, this is what one is expected to follow in terms of duties. But there may be exceptional situations in one's life or in society or in the country where it may become extremely difficult to follow exclusively one's own duty. So in emergency situations, the Shastras say there is allowance for one Varna to temporarily adopt the duties of another Varna to save the situation. And we will discuss how. Except unless there is an emergency, the Shastras say the lower Varnas should not accept the duties of the higher Varna. So Vaishya cannot act as a Kshatriya unless there is an emergency, or a Kshatriya cannot act as a Brahmana unless there is an emergency. But everyone except a Kshatriya may accept the means of livelihoods of others. So very interesting. So it says Kshatriya should not do that, but others can do. Everyone, which means a Kshatriya should never be begging. So in emergency, one may accept the following professions. The Bhagavatam says, Rita, one may collect grains from the field. Amrita, one may collect without begging. Mrita, one may beg for grains. Paramrita, one may till the ground. And Satyanrita, one may perform trade. So these are all emergency ways of somehow or the other maintaining one's body. But the scriptures especially forbid those who are in Varnashram system to adopt Swavritti. Swavritti means a dog-like attitude. What is a dog-like attitude? A dog-like attitude means to become a servant of low-class people. Do not serve low-class people. And this is one of the reasons why Rupa and Sanatan, we were discussing earlier, right? They were practically excommunicated from the Brahmana community because they were forced to serve low-class people. And that is banned. You cannot. Of course, nowadays it's so difficult. Practically all who are in employment are more or less serving low-class people. How many can say that they have masters who are uh, of the right Varnas, that one can proudly say, I am proud to serve so and so. So that's why Prabhupada in some of these purports, he says that Kali Yuga situation is actually an emergency situation. Is actually an emergency situation. And Prabhupada makes a very interesting point. He says, you see, a Brahmana is supposed to perform the duty of a Brahmana. When Kali Yuga, Brahmanas are not performing their duties. They're not studying scriptures, they're not teaching scriptures, they're not guiding society properly. So what to do? I have to bring people from the other orders, train them up, give them sacred thread, make them Brahmanas and make them teach. And you all are criticizing them that you are not Brahmanas, why you are doing this. The emergency, if they don't do, who will do? If Brahmanas are doing their duties, then I don't have to do all this. Correct? Yeah. Correct. For example, sometimes in warlike situations, there are not enough soldiers, and even the common man, the peasants, the Shudras, Brahmanas, they also take up weapons, emergency duties. Parshuram, it was an emergency that the Kshatriyas became so notorious, he had to take up the Parshu and subdue the Kshatriyas 21 times. So these are emergency duties that they perform where they took up the duty of another Varna because the situation demanded. But again, it should be done as has been described in the scriptures. So don't take duties of higher ashram unless there is a emergency. Lower one's duties one can adopt temporarily if there is a need, except for a Kshatriya who should never beg. Specifically Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, because Brahmanas and Kshatriyas are very respectable positions and are considered significantly high. Brahmana is predominantly situated in the mode of goodness, and a Kshatriya is a mixture of the mode of goodness and passion. Because governance requires some passion. Brahmanas, very important, should be well versed in scriptures, and Kshatriyas must be well versed in worshipping the Devatas. That is what the Bhagavatam says. What are the symptoms of a Brahman? Next. Now we spoke about profession. Now what are the symptoms? What are the qualities? So there are various qualities of a Brahman which are mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Samodamat tapashaucham santoshak shantirarjavam jnanam dayachyutatmatvam satyam cha brahma lakshanam. Similar verses than in the Bhagavad Gita, slightly different, but more or less the same list of qualities. Sama dama tapashaucham. Samaha, control of the mind. Damaha, control of the senses. Tapaha, austerity. Shaucham, cleanliness. Santosha, satisfaction. Satisfaction is very, very important. Satisfaction is a very distinct quality of a Brahman. A Vaishya is never satisfied because Vaishya is after money. Vaishya is greedy for money, a Kshatriya is greedy for power. Brahmana is satisfied. And a Kshatriya is greedy for sense enjoyment. Sorry, a Shudra is greedy for sense enjoyment. A Shudra typically by nature is unclean and is interested in unrestricted sense enjoyment. Lying, stealing, uh, uncontrolled sense enjoyment, intoxication, these are very common amongst the peoples. Anyway, so sama, dama, tapa, shaucham, santosha, shanti, forgiveness. Forgiveness also means not being agitated by anger. Simplicity, arjavam, jnanam, knowledge, daya, mercy, achyut, atmatvam, accepting oneself as a servant of Achyuta, a devotee of the Lord. Satyam, truthfulness. These are Brahma Lakshanam, symptoms of a Brahman. What are the symptoms of a Kshatriya? The symptoms of a Kshatriya: Shauryam, Viryam, Dhritistejaha, Tyagas-chatmajayah, Shama, Brahmanyata, Prasadascha, Satyam cha, Kshatra Lakshanam. What are the Kshatra Lakshan? Sauryam, power in battle. Viryam, being unconquerable. Dhriti, patient. Patient means even if there are big reversals, even if he sometimes loses, he doesn't lose courage. Tejaha, ability to defeat others. Tyagaha, giving in charity. Atmajayaha, not being overwhelmed by bodily necessities. Very tolerant of bodily inconveniences. Shama, forgiveness. Brahmanyata, faithfulness to Brahmanical principles. And prasadaha, jolliness in any condition of life. What does that mean? This is not the same as Santosh. Santosh is the satisfied peacefulness of a Brahmana is known as Santosh. Prasada here, jolliness in any condition means, in Hindi or in Bombay, we say bindast. Have you heard the word bindast? Or in Bombay, they say bindas. Actually, the word is bindast. Whatever, it's okay. No problem. Whatever happens, no problem. I will go on. That kind of an attitude, do or die, or not being too bothered, no matter how big the difficulties are. Satyam, truthfulness. These are Shatra Lakshana. What are the symptoms of a Vaishya? Devoted to the Devatas, the Guru and the Supreme Lord. Always endeavoring to advance in religious principles. Economic development, always wanting to increase one's wealth. And sense gratification. Dharma, Artha, Kama. Vaishyas are generally not too interested in moksha. Kshatriyas are still interested in moksha, but generally Vaishyas are Dharma, Artha, Kama. They may talk a little bit about moksha, but they are not thrilled. But the good thing about them is, for proper Vaishyas, they want to earn Dharma, they want to earn Artha and perform Kama, enjoyment, by doing Dharma. They don't want to stray. So Dharma, Artha, Kama. And they have faith in scripture, they have faith in the Guru. They are always thinking how to earn more money. Vaishya, you can see, and you can see this even amongst some devotees, because devotees also have different natures, right? At the sadhaka level. Some are very Brahmanical in nature, always like to study, teach. Some are like administration, they want to control, they want to direct, they want to administer. And there are Vaishyas. Vaishyas means they're always in every conversation looking for how they can make some money out of the situation. So some people are, that is the natural disposition, and such people become very good salespeople, very good mercantile people, because they have that natural tendency, expertise in earning money. What about the Shudras? The Shudras' duties or qualities are offering obeisances to the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, means being respectful. They are expected to be clean. They should not be duplicitous. They should serve their master nicely. They can participate in yajnas, but they cannot chant mantras because they are not either trained or they are not given mantras through Diksha. But they can sit and they can just offer swaha, swaha, can throw grains from a distance. That's what we do also, isn't it? Those who are not initiated, they cannot perform yajna or do mantras or do ahuti. From long distance, you give them grains. You are faithful, you are in the system, you can throw grains from a distance. You can participate, but you cannot perform. Performing sacrifices without uttering mantras. Not stealing. It is strongly a tendency of Shudras to steal. So they should not steal. They should always speak the truth. And they should always take care and protect the cows and the Brahmins. These are the symptoms of a Shudra. Okay. So the occupational duties of the four Varnas were described. The qualities of the four Varnas have been described. Now the duties, oh, it is 9:57. I think we'll stop here. Now the next section is, what are the duties of a chaste woman? So the section 1 is, what are the duties of a chaste woman? And then there is a section which is about mixed varnas. So I don't want to hurry too much. So let's do that the next time. The duties of a chaste wife and mixed varnas. It'll be interesting to discuss a bit around them. Okay, so forgive me, this section is pretty technical, but nonetheless, understanding of this system is very important for us as devotees. Even though in Kali Yuga we may not have Varnashram system in a well-organized format, but nonetheless, it is important to understand the principles and see how to implement those principles in our own life depending on our own nature. So Prabhupada would often refer to that as the Daiva Varnashram system, which means basically understanding our tendency and using our tendencies and nature in the service of the Supreme Lord. And ultimately, that is what is the essence of Varnashram. The essence of Varnashram is to engage one's nature in the service of the Supreme Lord into. Any questions or comments? Okay. So thank you very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai. So thank you so much for accommodating the class today. So tomorrow no class. We will have a next class on Tuesday. Thank you so much for making yourself available today. Hare Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhu, thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you,
Hare
thank
Krishna
you.
Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Induleka Mataji, Suraj, Tarun, Sridevi ji, Shalini ji,
Hare Krishna.
Sneha ji, Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. I see one named Shivanti Mutaiha. Who's that? Welcome. Anyways, sometimes some individuals I may know by another name or the Zoom name may be different. So anyway, just wanted to welcome you. Thank you, Anand Sundari Mataji, Induleka Mataji, Jnana Chandran, Archana ji, Sridevi ji.